So welcome everyone to our May the Marketing Be With You panel discussion on all things marketing, music marketing. I am so excited to welcome our panelists, and I'd like to just take a moment if you all wouldn't mind introducing yourself and letting us know where you are. We can start with Kip if you want.
I'll go first. Yeah. So I'm Dr. Kip Franklin. I teach at the University of South Alabama in Mobile.
And Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Denny-Chambers of Clarinet Playground. I got my doctorate in music, but I decided to go a different route. So now I'm just writing music and pedagogical materials.
Great. And Maggie?
I'm Dr. Magie Smith, and I am the clarinet professor at Eastern Illinois University.
Great. I'm just going in order on my screen. Larkin?
Hi, I'm Larkin Sanders. I am the owner of the Clever Clarinetist and the executive director of the Taney-Como Festival Orchestra and clarinet professor at Washburn University.
Cool. And last but definitely not least, Andrea?
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Andrea Vos-Rochefort, and I teach clarinet at Texas A&M University Kingsville, and I am in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Great. So we're going to break this panel into three sections. The first thing is kind of our job section. So applying for jobs and all things job related. So one of the things that I think I've had struggles with in the past, but is yes. The Maggie, did you introduce yourself?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay. Sorry, my train of thought just stopped. So resumes, what to include on them? What makes a good resume? What's the difference between a resume and a CV? So let's just talk kind of the nuts and bolts of things that that we might have to prepare for a job interview. I'll just open this up to anyone who would like to maybe start with what's the difference between a resume and CV, and when would you need to prepare them?
I can start that off if we'd like. So in my experience, a resume is a very, very brief encapsulation of everything that you've done. What I mean by that is typically a resume is one page that highlights the very best of what you have to offer. Where I've encountered resumes is if, for example, you're applying for an orchestral playing position. You know, those folks care less about if you've published an article or if you know, and frankly, you know, where you went to school and things like that. They want to know, like, do you have a degree in clarinet? What orchestras do you play with? And tell me like 3 other things about you. More common, what I find in academia is the curriculum vitae, the CV, which is multiple pages of everything that you've done, where you went to school, what's your experiences, what articles you've published, what extracurricular stuff you've done, you know, and you have, I don't know, I think mine is somewhere between 9 and 10 pages now, you know. So that's kind of the main difference between the two. The resume is a very, very, very brief, short summary of you. The curriculum vitae is much more detailed and quite a bit lengthier depending on what you're applying for and what stage of the career you're at.
Great. And what kind of things do you all suggest putting on resumes? Or what are your tips and tricks for a resume? I know Larkin, you shared, or ICA shared something of yours that kind of addressed some of this. Can you go into that a little bit?
Sure. So if you go check out the ICA social media page, you'll see a series of 3 images that I made that involve a fictional character, Miss Claire Annette Reed, and she is applying for her first big orchestra job. She's fresh out of school, and her first draft is is kind of rough. At first glance, it looks nice because it's, you know, at least kind of organized. It's one page. She included her name. You know, she got the first things right. But the places where she went wrong were pretty simple. Like there was no contact information for clarinet read, and all of her stuff was out of order. And there were things on her resume that were 10 years old. And there are also things on her resume that were not related, like a solo tuba recital, not related to a clarinet performance job, right? So that's also really important, is that you're picking experience that is really applicable to the job you're applying for. For my own personal resume maintenance, I actually keep like a really long document of everything I've done, like at the level of a CV, like Dr. Kip was just telling us about. And I just delete stuff that is not applicable to the job I'm applying for. So I start with everything and just kind of check things off that aren't applicable to the job. And also, I did want to say, if you're applying for a job in like arts administration or something that's not orchestral that requires a resume, it's still a one-page thing, but usually they want it to be experience-based. So they want you to list the things you have done and the things you are capable of doing, maybe under like a subtitle of the job itself, but they are more interested in the stuff you're capable of doing. But that's kind of my favorite trick of resume writing, is having one document to start off with, to duplicate, and then to delete anything that's not applicable to the current job I'm applying for.
I think it's really awesome what Larkin said about organization, and that's something to keep in mind with both of these documents. It's really important that the person reading it can find what they need to find quickly, like a treasure map. And when I think about the difference, I think about the time they're going to spend on it. You think about an orchestral resume, they're going to pull it up in the 30 seconds before you play, and they need to be able to see everything in that time. Now your CV, while it's really long, the person who's going to read it is probably very busy and sitting on the committee, but doing 1,000 other things. So you need to think about them like drinking their coffee, and can they find everything they need to within 5 minutes? And Larkin is absolutely right. It needs to be specific to every job. We like to think, oh, I've got a CV, I'm golden, I can apply to 7 different jobs. But you really need to research the job and figure out what part of you is going to appeal to them the most, and really put that front and center.
I would like to piggyback on that, just because I don't know, I feel like I've served on like 20 search committees in the past 15 years, and it's really important that when you're applying for a job that you examine the job description, and any way that you can enhance something that the committee is looking for, be it graduate student teaching, like have you taught graduate students, you've got to put it in there. If you're good at theory, you've got to put it in there. And also, I was going to say, you know, when you're making a CV, depending on, or a resume, depending on what you're applying for, whatever is the most dominant part of the job you're applying for, that's the work experience you want to start with. You know, I've been on so many committees of people wanting to teach, and they start with their performance career, which of course that's wonderful, but I will tell you, at a regional institution where I work, you know, we're most interested in your teaching experience. So when we get these sort of strange CVs that are just like, here's my Broadway list of things I've done, it's, you know, what we want to see first is, have you taught? So just consider the arrangement of your specialties when you apply.
Yeah, I like to think about when I construct things like that, and now when I coach students to do the same, like just have, because as everyone have said, like and I've been there, I've been on the committee with the coffee, and it's like, okay, I have 5 minutes, you know, who is this person and what are they about? I like to think of, you know, construct your vita or your resume in such a way that like every element invites the reader to want to read into the next thing, you know, so that they can find what they need really quickly, but also that it flows logically, kind of what you were saying about, okay, if you're looking for somebody who can teach, put your teaching experience before your performance experience, so that they don't say, you know, even if you've got a wealth of teaching experience, don't bury it, you know, put it front and center so that it invites people to sort of flow into like, okay, hey, he's, you know, hey, he's a great teacher. Oh, look, he's got all this other performance stuff. Oh, look, he published something in a music theory journal. He's got, that's the kind of thing that will pique people's interest and make them read to page 3, 4, and 5, and then hopefully put you in the short pile instead of the no pile.
Thank you. I just have one more thing to say, and this wasn't mentioned in any of our sort of comments, but if anyone watches this somewhere down the road and they're looking, to get a job or thinking they want to teach in higher ed, watch your grades, because that's another thing you have to submit are your transcripts. And people don't really want to hire someone that got a C in lessons or a C in music theory. I'm not saying I don't personally, but I'm just saying that is a big thing to consider if you want to work in higher ed.
One last quick question that I just thought of with the CV. When you're first starting out and you're coming out of high school, a lot of things, and you have your high school on there. At what point, or do you all have kind of guidelines about what point do you start to drop things off that are maybe technically relevant, but maybe shouldn't be on a CV, even though it is supposed to be all encompassing?
That was something I was actually going to talk about, so I'm really glad you brought it up. I would say, like, especially if you're young and maybe you're still in college or maybe you're just entering college, go ahead and start collecting everything and make your long list of everything like Larkin was talking about. And that way you have that to use as a pool to get material from. But I always say, like, every summer, go through and clean and delete. It's like, okay, you're a sophomore in college. We don't need to know that you were first chair in the all-state band anymore. Like, that's gone. Like, once you get into college, nobody cares about high school. You have to prove yourself from that point forward. But I did start to clean because at first, it's like you got to have all this filler. You feel like you need filler. Like, well, I did play in that one community band a long time ago. But just as you start becoming more successful and having more refined experiences, you're just going to know. Just trust your gut. Maybe like once a year, just delete all the fluff and get rid of that stuff.
Great. So along with many jobs, I don't believe a lot of performance jobs, but a lot of arts admin, teaching jobs, and even sometimes references, they require a cover letter. So we've created our resume or our CV. What's the point if we've already listed everything? What's the point of a cover letter? What should we include? What's your advice about it?
Can I start? Because I've read, I don't know, a couple hundred this year. I think your cover letter should enhance or sort of highlight your CV a bit. My preference as a committee member of searches is that the letter is less than 2 pages. I think keep it to a page, big time. It doesn't, if you think that your interview went really long because it was supposed to, it wasn't, because there was probably someone that was to go after you. So just keep it brief, highlight yourself. Just a couple things I wanted to mention. I have been on committees where people have been moved to the no pile immediately just because their letter was not addressed to the right school or job. It's like, I know that you're busy, but and I know it's meticulous and I know like saving files and stuff, but make sure that the letter that you send is addressed to the right people, because they'll be offended. Like, oh, I guess, not really offended, but sort of. Write it well. Use good grammar, spelling, usage. I mean, that people in academia, I know that we all know this. We judge people. It's like, oh, that email had so many errors in it. But, if you are not good at it, make sure that you find somebody who could maybe just help you and say, you need a comma here, or you don't need this comma. You spelled this wrong. So just put your best self forward. That's all I have to say.
I would say read your cover letter aloud to yourself before you submit it. You would be shocked at how, even if the like I feel this because I've been on search committees too, and there are many good applicants that have good content, but are not so good about expressing it in written English, you know? So I think if you read the cover letter aloud and even record yourself doing it and listen back, like listen to where you trip over the words or where the language is clumsy or things like that. I mean, I have my little like check sheet here, but one of the things that people say this all the time in cover letters, they say like, you know, at such and such school, I have had the opportunity to, and like, you don't need that in there because that's confusing language. You know, if you have the opportunity to do something, it doesn't convey the meaning that you've actually done it, you know? So language like that adds words, confuses meaning. Just be as direct as possible and say exactly what you mean to say. And to second Maggie, one page cover letter. If it's more than one page, it better not be, you know, don't tell me your whole philosophy about life and teaching and all the experiences, you know, just who are you? What are you doing right now? Why do you want this job? And what are your qualifications for it? And if you can do that, you know, in 11.5 font and a single page, you're good.
That is excellent advice. I wish someone had told me to read it aloud because I definitely wrote some cringeworthy cover letters early on. And everybody does, it's pretty normal. And I used to hate them, and I think most people do. But I made peace with it and realizing that it's not redundant. The cover letter is a chance for you to guide someone through your CV. So you take the cover letter and you show them that you've done research about their institution, you know what they need, what they want, and what maybe they don't even know yet that they want. And you guide them through your CV and show them why you are the perfect person for that job and how much you care about their institution already, which includes putting the right institution at the top. Yes.
I think, oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Hang on. It'll come back to me. Oh, yeah. I think I like the guiding it through the CV part, but don't try to avoid just having it be like a concise summary. You know, the first thing that I read is the cover letter. So I want the cover letter to entice me to look at the CV. I don't want to see too much redundancy there. But the way I say this to students is, you know, you've heard this old phrase about the first impression is the most important one that you can make. Well, guess what? The people who are vetting you for this job don't know who you are, don't know what you look like, don't know what you sound like. All they know is how you represent yourself in written English. So again, just as direct and clear as you can make it, I think that right away will move you from the general application pile to the people who warrant a second and third look and discussion.
Absolutely. And also make it look sharp. Use the same font, use a Word document template or something, but keeping it concise and making it all formatted correctly it's very impressive, you know. And I know it's difficult for some people, but we're perfectionists, so.
And if
Because
you're
we play
just
clarinet.
if you're just coming out of school and you're worried about the, I don't know, the committee receiving your stuff and drawing attention to something specific. Like I know for me, when I graduated from school, I had one big thing on my CV and resume, and it was that I had started a music festival. And I finally went to the writing center at my university, which if you have one, use it. They're super helpful and they want you to get a job. So if you're unsure about your writing, go there. And I went to the writing center specifically because I wanted to know how to best highlight this one thing that I had accomplished, because you also don't want to go on and on a resume or CV about what you did, because I've literally done everything that you can do to run a music festival. But if I wrote all that out, it would be like a 2-page long list, and that's ridiculous. So that's where someone told me that the way to highlight that experience would be through my cover letter, to like save a portion of a paragraph to say, you know, I'm fresh out of school, but I did this really cool thing. Check it out. So it can also be a tool to highlight something really important that you've done that is directly applicable, again, to the job you're applying for.
if I could just piggyback really quick, in addition to the Writing Center, a lot of universities have career counselors that are available to current students and also alumni. So if you graduate, and you're out of school for a year and you start looking for a job, those people are still there to help you. So you should utilize them. I have been, you know, I tend to be a little bit cynical sometimes about those services, but I have been remarkably surprised at the content that my students have brought me after they've been to a writing center and a career counseling session. Like it's a very good service.
And don't be afraid to ask people you look up to if you can see cover letters that they've written, if you can see CVs that they've put out there. Pick the people that you admire that are doing well and just get an idea of what's out there and what you can do. And then take their criticism and don't get hurt. I still remember my very first resume I wrote. I was so proud. It had like orange on the top, and I was like, it's me. And they were like, don't do that. And they were exactly right. People will be honest with you, and it's so helpful.
I just want to say I love that because I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Kristen.
No, it's okay.
Well, when I got this job, I was just finishing my coursework. I was ABD, and I was sort of like, "What's Eastern Illinois University?" I don't even know. I mean, and my teacher, Jim Pine, was like really old school. He would say you should apply for this, but we didn't talk a lot about the specifics, like the things we're talking about right now. Um, but I just asked one of my mentors, a flute DMA student, and she sent me her CV, and I used it as a model for my own. But yeah, I just want to say, find somebody that you know knows how to do it.
I was just going to piggyback off of what Kip said. A lot of people have their CVs on their website. So if there's somebody that you admire, you might not even have to bug them to see their CV and have some models to look at. But just one other thing to consider. I did want to share that whenever I applied to be a band director, after I was accepted, they told me that there were a few people that tried to put funny things on their cover letters. So you want to try to get away from that kind of thing. Like there was even somebody that put a comic strip at the bottom of their cover letter. And you think that you're trying to be funny or you're trying to get somebody's attention, but that is just not the way to do it.
I would also just say, since somebody mentioned, CVs being on websites, just keep in mind that if you really at any stage of the application process, you're a little bit vulnerable to people like Googling you and things like that, especially the farther up the applicant pool you progress. So you want to make sure that anything that you post on the internet is obviously appropriate, but also timely. Like one of the reasons I took my website down was just because like I can't maintain it anymore. And I don't play now the way I played 5, 6, 7 years ago, So that's a long-term project for me, is to get that more current and things like that. But just be aware that what you post out there is visible to people who may or may not want to hire you.
Great. I'm going to actually, for time, move us along, and I'm going to combine kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is, recordings and the other materials that you might have to submit. For example, a lot of universities and jobs, arts administration, or are asking for different kinds of statements, diversity statements, teaching philosophy. So if you have any thoughts on that, you're welcome to add that. But going off of recordings, I want to talk a little bit about our digital promotion, because people can see us. We want to always put our best foot forward. So since Kip brought it up first, let's talk websites. What kinds of insights do you all have about people creating websites, what to post on the websites, and maybe a little bit about recordings that maybe you don't submit to a job but are easily accessible to other people? I'll open it up to anyone.
I can start with that. I think with the websites, the way that I did it is I just started to look at other people's websites to see what are they doing, because technology, I will totally admit, is something that is not my forte, and I've had to learn a lot. But I looked at other people's websites, and I had other people look at my old website before the Clarinet Playground website. It was atrocious. And they were like, oh, it's so badly organized, and what does this mean? And so I had to like really totally rebuild and say, okay, what are the important tabs I need to have? Okay, I need to have something that says like about. So like something about me, and then something about like any kind of recordings that I might want to share. So I have a section of recordings. And then if you have events, or if you commonly do events, you could have an events section that shows all your events that are coming up or concerts that are coming up. And then how to contact you. That's very important. And then organize it in a way that makes sense and it flows and it's really easy to find things. And if you have other things that you do, like if you have a store, you can have that on there too. But that's kind of the basic template. And there's lots of different web building services now. Like I use WordPress. It's very user friendly for beginners. It's like drag and drop, really, really easy to use. And there's even other ones that are new and free now that I've seen that you can build a website for free. But the resources are ridiculous. So it looks scary when you look at a website and you think, how did that all come to be? Well, all you gotta do is just log in, and then it says, do you want this? And you're like, yeah. And then it just shows up on the screen, and then you didn't even realize it's so easy to do. So it is pretty easy to do.
So I maintain like 4 websites now, which is great. I love website building. So I spent a lot of time working in e-commerce through the Clever Clarinetist. So I maintain that website, my own personal website, my music festival's website, and an ensemble that I manage here in Kansas City as well. And they are all pretty different websites. So you also have to consider that there is not like one full form for a musician's website, depending on whether you're representing an ensemble, an organization, yourself, your shop, whatever. Be conscious of that. Like you can't, and like Kristen was saying, like go look at other people's websites and audit them. This is a really important skill I had to work on a lot as an arts administration student in graduate school, was looking at different organizations' websites and just figuring out what I liked and what I didn't like about them and kind of giving them like a score of usability. And I feel like I looked at an unfortunate amount of really terrible websites, and it's like these organizations need money and they're worthwhile, but why would anybody help them? They can't figure it out. Like they'll have like donate at the top of the page but nowhere to actually send money. Stuff like simple things, just audit and learn.
I think one thing I might ask are, what are some of the don'ts? What are some things that might feel good to do or might look good to do to you, but what are some things that you noticed in looking at other people's websites that maybe is not a good idea?
Broken links are the worst. So making sure that any button you've added, they work. Please test them before you publish it. And I say that so snarkily, and I've totally done it myself. So it comes from a place of insecurity and love for everybody building their own website. And visibility. And I mean that not just like on Google, I mean like actually looking at the screen. If your grandma looked at your website, could she read it? Think about that. If grandma couldn't read it, there are a lot of people that can't read it. So like if you've got a busy background or something, maybe don't. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, keep it clean.
I think one of the things that I noticed, and I actually, before I built my own website, huge stressor, my master's teacher, Mark Nuccio, asked me to build a website for him. So I looked at a lot of websites before I built his first one. It's not his current one. His current one is much better now than what I made for him. But I looked at a lot of them, and the things that stick out, if your website does not work on phones, you have a problem. It is way too late to have a website that doesn't work on phones. Squarespace is really good at making it line up without any extra thought, but if you're using a different format, you want to make sure that whatever people are looking at it on, and sorry, it's most often going to be a phone, it looks good. The other thing in terms of visibility, and this was something I learned the hard way because I made him his website and he was like, why doesn't it show up first? This isn't automatic. when you make a website, you need to have connections to other websites, and that way, when the internet checks it out, it'll be like, oh, this is a legit website. It's connected to this and that and this and that, and it's not just an island. So you need to look into that and make sure that you have your tags set up and that it is connected to wherever you can. Sometimes that's hard when you start out. You don't have many profiles to link to. You can put your Facebook and Instagram on there, but you better make sure they're professional if you do that. But that's just something to keep in mind. You want to be able to Google it and have that be the first thing that comes up when people are looking for you.
I think that's a really great point, Andrea, about coming up in Google. And just in case the like tag concept is like, what? There are these things called search engine optimizations that you can use for free on your website. You don't have to pay extra for search engine optimization, SEO. I know for my website, I was able to set up a pattern so that there is some kind of SEO automatically created for every single page that I build. And as a retailer doing e-commerce, that's really important because I'm making like a new page almost every day. So like today, I think I made like 14 just by creating new products. It's kind of crazy. Ideally, you'll be going into each single page and creating new search engine optimization language. So not only the title of the page, but a description of the page, because Google uses the title and the description of every web page to order things. It's not that complicated, but it is a little bit tedious and it takes time.
So I think a lot of times musicians will go through, when they're young, they might be a little slapdash with the things that they put out there. They maybe, record themselves in a practice room and then throw it onto their YouTube. And then later they hook their YouTube onto their website. And versus kind of the over perfectionism that a lot of people have, where they don't want anyone to see their recordings. They're really picky. Nothing's good enough. Do you all have any thoughts on that? Maggie, I saw.
I'm sure everyone has thoughts on this, but I've had graduate students in the past, and sometimes I find things that are online, and I've been quite appalled. Like, you should not have put this online. I mean, and maybe it's because I've had an old school teacher, but people can Google you and find this. It's not great. Search committees do search Facebook. They do search YouTube. I mean, I do it all the time. So just be careful what you put out there. Make sure that it's good quality. I guess one thing I want to say about recordings and what people can access, man, you want to make sure that you're playing in tune. That is so important. If you can play in tune, you can get anybody on your side. If you're playing real sharp, and clarinetists do that, myself included. I used to play on a 68 barrel on my old horn, just to keep the pitch down, just to, remember, I guess, on search committees, you're dealing with not just clarinet players, you're dealing with musicians. So I think pitch and musicality, those are the kinds of things that you want to make sure are out there for the world to hear, and what you submit for your sound recordings. But I know often committees are looking for live recordings. I know, I guess where I am, that's what we want, not your edited CDs. So, you can get that via recital or, your own private recording session, but play in tune.
Yeah, I think with that also, I think that especially like for me, when I was still applying for jobs, I would submit sort of a 3/4 live, and I had like a couple studio recordings that I was pretty proud of that I put out there too, because it's also evidence of like creative activity. But it just took me so long. And I'm not really sure I'm here to this point in my career yet, but I'm certainly closer to it where, like, don't confuse good recordings with perfect recordings. If you have a live recording of yourself playing the Nielsen concerto, on your graduate recital, and, you squeak 7.5 minutes in, it's still probably, good to submit. And why? Because all of us, there is not a single performer that's sitting on your search committee that has not made a comparable mistake in a live performance in their life, despite what they may tell you. So we're all human in that regard. So just because there is a flaw or a couple of minor, just fact of life flaws in the recording does not mean it's a bad recording that you can't submit it. Things that are bad recordings, like Maggie said, if you're just out of tune, if you play with bad rhythm, if your clarinet exploded during the second movement or something like that, those are things that you probably don't need to submit. But when you're submitting, you don't need to, vet yourself, but don't do it with such scrutiny that you end up not wanting to submit anything. And then, show people a variety of how you can play. Don't submit the Brahms E flat sonata and the Brahms F minor sonata, and then, something else in the romantic vein. Like, try to showcase, if you can play jazz, put yourself playing a jazz chart out there, then put Brahms, or put Brahms first if you're applying for, a performance job, and just kind of showcase all facets of your playing so that you have the widest appeal to the committee pool.
I like to tell people, think of it like a group project. No one wants to hire the person who's there trying to impress everyone and play a gazillion notes all in the same genre. They want to know that you have your stuff together and that you collaborate well and that you're flexible and you have something to say. So I think that goes a lot farther than trying to make a perfectionist impressive something. No one wants to be impressed anymore. They want to work with someone.
That's beautiful and so true.
So let's talk just a minute about, maybe not people who, academic jobs are few and far between sometimes, but let's talk a little bit about the kinds of things you want to put out there, whether it's recordings or websites or social media pages, if you're trying to just promote yourself as a musician. What kinds of places do you go? What kinds of things should you take into consideration? And how much redundancy should there be between all of the different pages that you might create? I'll open that up for anyone.
Can I add a tag to that question? One of my students had to leave, but she asked if a website is too much of an investment or too much of a commitment right now in school, how should you use social media accounts to fill that? So I think that goes really well with this question.
If you wouldn't mind, Kristen, I think this is really in your wheelhouse, about utilizing and even building community. I know that there's a lot of things. Do you mind giving us a little bit of your wisdom on this?
Sure. Like I said, I still have a lot to learn about technology. I don't know if you watch any of my live stuff, but most of the time it ends up landing where I didn't intend it to land, somewhere in a different Facebook page or a different group than I intended. So I still have a lot to learn. But as far as like what I've been doing on social media, it's kind of funny. It's like I did the, like the expression, the cart before the horse or whatever. I didn't have a product when I started. So I just wanted a community. So like that just happened, like Etude of the Week just happened, and it was almost an accident, and it was just fun. I needed to get back in shape big time. I had kids and I had dental surgery, and so that's kind of how that all came to be. And then I started having a product, and it was like, oh, this is cool. And I didn't even like attack that community. I created a different community because I'm like, I'm not going to bug them with my stuff, right? So then I did the Clarinet Playground group, but a bunch of those people came over and hung out with me there. But I do some crossover, so like I might post something on Facebook and on Instagram, but I don't always do the same thing on everything. I kind of mix it up. Sometimes I just don't have time to post everywhere, and I'm still learning like how to, post wisely and in what kind of timely manner, and that's just kind of an experiment too. And then you just have to be you. So if your main focus is I've got to get a job or I've got to get money, then you kind of lose some of the personal qualities of it. It's like I just want to be here, right? You just want to be here, be yourself, be true to what you're saying, and then everything just kind of lines up and falls into place. That's just my general opinion.
Larkin, you also have extensive experience with this. Do you mind adding anything to that?
Sure. I mean, I just love what you said, Kristen, about like being true to yourself and being authentic. In a world where you can be whoever you want to be on the internet, it's really refreshing to see some real stuff out there. It's like, I know for me at Clever Clarinetist, like I really like graphic designing and making real dorky designs all around the clarinet, and I've just kind of thrown caution to the wind and have just made whatever I want to make. And sometimes I run designs by like my boyfriend just to make sure it's not too crazy. But really, I feel like I'm starting to find my voice on social media just by doing like what I want to do and putting the content out there that I want to put out there. Especially as long as it is like either helping people, bringing them joy, or lifting them up too. I never want to put anything out there that's going to bring anyone down or make them feel bad about themselves. Which I don't know, I guess could be a difficult balance to tread if you have malicious intent. But I think if you're being like true to yourself as a good human and contributor to the clarinet community, you'll probably put some good stuff out there.
To add on just a
Yeah,
little
Andrea, sorry, I wanted to call on you next because you messaged me about finding your place and making yourself the center. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, Larkin mentioned to be you is most important, and it's so true. But also, when you're doing something online, you need to make sure that you're doing it for you, in a sense. If you're doing it for the likes, you're going to be miserable. The algorithms are not going to be in your favor, the odds will not, something, you'll be miserable. But find something that helps you, and if it helps you, there's a really good chance that it's going to help other people. Um, I still remember when I finished my doctoral degree and I didn't have a job right away. I was really bummed. And I started thinking, I want to teach. I want to teach college level students. I'm teaching high school, elementary, middle school, everything in between. And I realized that I could practice my teaching by putting content online and by listening more critically to myself. And it was something I did for me. And it's been just awesome to hear about how it's helped other people. But I think that's the best way to continue something. If you're doing it for you, you'll do it with joy. And if there's joy, you'll attract people. But if you're doing it for the likes, you'll probably be miserable. So that's my best advice there.
And I'd like to kind of tie this, sorry, I'm echoing. I'd like to kind of tie this now into, you were, hoping to get a teaching job, but you were also being brave and putting your stuff out there. Can anybody speak to the balance between wanting to make sure everything you put out there is, good enough for a search committee to find, and being true to yourself, and also having fun and being okay with maybe putting things that are silly out there?
One of the best pieces of advice I got, and this was about orchestral auditions, it was like, sometimes you don't get the job because you don't fit. And that might be your sound, and it's not that your sound is wrong, your sound doesn't fit with that orchestra. And you could force it, but you would be miserable with that orchestra because your sound would never be quite right. So if it's something that brings you joy, don't worry about other people judging it. If it's not going to work for them, you probably don't want to work with them.
Preach.
Yeah, that's incredibly true, but also incredibly hard to process. Especially, when you feel particularly invested in something. But whenever something doesn't work out in your favor, it never feels great in the moment. But, moving forward, there is a lot of truth to what Andrea said. It is a question of fit. And even if you were to try to force yourself into a mold, you would not be happy. So it really is probably for the best not to dwell on anything like that.
Great. So I would like to round this out. We have about 12 minutes left. I'd like to round this out by talking a little bit about advice we might give to up and coming students. Somebody who just graduated undergrad, they might take a gap year, or someone who just finished and they're applying for jobs, but they need to move somewhere and build a studio or start gigging. How do you promote yourself, create marketing materials, find work in your first couple years after you leave the safe haven of school?
So I am a huge fan of Angela Miles Beeching. If any of y'all have read her books and yep, there it is. Andrew's got it. Beyond Talent. It's the best. I think that's like reading list number one for anyone who is getting ready to embark on a music career or to leave school and is trying to do something. I thought I wanted like a real job when I graduated from school, and I guess I have a real job, but I am kind of piecing together my own version of a clarinet career right now. And so what happened? I think, oh, that's right. Angela Miles Beeching, she gave me, she gives everyone in her book that you read this concept of like a tree and figuring out like your path in life. So like mine is like Larkin Sanders, musician, and then it branches off into all the different things I have tried throughout school. Whether it was like playing in the university orchestra or the new music ensemble or clarinet quartet or woodwind quintet or whatever, and seeking out the things that like flourished into something great and also brought me joy. So for me, it meant really going for situations where I could be in leadership. So being a big boss lady was important to me. Playing in small ensembles brought me infinitely more joy than playing in large ensembles. And I like the business stuff. I like designing promotional materials and bossing people around. I know that's not for everybody, but making this kind of tree was really help me kind of forge my own path with my career.
One of the things I encourage my students to do regarding networking is, instead of looking around and just seeing what can these people do for me, start to ask yourself, what could I do for them? What could I create that would maybe benefit them? You want to end up being the person in the group that's creating the opportunities, that's creating the gigs. During my doctoral degree, I did a project on elementary outreach using modern composers like Stockhausen and Schoenberg, and it was a lot of fun. And I created a lot of gigs, and it was a great way to get to know people around me and to bring something to them and indulge my personal quirks. So when you approach them and you can offer them something, a lot of times they're more open to approach you with something afterwards. It's reverse networking in a way, but it's more fun, I think. It's like Christmas gift giving.
I would say for anybody first trying to build a clarinet studio, fresh out of college, number one, if you're still in college, start teaching now. Get at least one student, because you have to learn while you're learning, so that whatever you're learning from your teacher, you can pass on and practice teaching it to somebody else. So you've got to be doing that. And if you haven't, it's okay, start now. And if you've already graduated and you're moving somewhere, I think for me, the best resources are band directors. So you got to like contact the band directors in the area and say, hey, I just moved here. I teach clarinet. I can coach ensembles. Can I come out to your school and do a free clinic with your clarinet section? And who's going to say no, right? So that's how I've recruited my students, and because I'm a former band director, that just works best for me because I know some band directors, so that helps. So just kind of use your strengths to network in a way that'll work best for you.
Real quick, what kinds of materials do you all send when you're trying to make a kind of a cold contact like that? I've gotten mini gigs by just reaching out to an orchestra director or a personnel manager and being like, hello, I'm here. I would like to be of service. So what are some things that you like to send to them? What is your press packet?
Definitely the resume. And a lot of times you always want to say, hey, I'd love to play for you, just so they know. I mean, if they want recordings, they'll ask for recordings, but they probably want to hear you live. And it's best to show that you're anxious to play for them live. And then we're reaching out to band directors. I'll try to have easy fix worksheets that I can come and give with my clinic and hand out. And a lot of times, if you really want to put the band director in your pocket, give them a way to have clarinetists that make more sound. That seems to be what every band director I've ever met wants. They want those clarinetists to not be so small. So if you can set up a sheet of pointers and leave it with them,
and tell them simple equipment that will make it better. Mouthpiece and reed, basically.
I am a huge fan of the good old-fashioned business card. I always have some of these on me, and it's quite memorable. It's gold, and that's fun. So I think a business card. It's what?
Is that an owl?
It's an owl on a clarinet.
Oh, clarinet. Oh my gosh, I love that. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So this is my little like sigil for house clever clarinetist, I guess. And on the other side, it's super basic. It has my information and how to get a hold of me. And that's really all you need. And this is a nice place to also express your personality with like colors or fun designs too, if you're just like dying for that.
Yeah, I would very, very, very briefly say just whatever you do, whether it's a handout or a business card, just make sure that your name and your email is on every single page. I mean, when I go give clinics somewhere and I have a footer like name, email, phone number, every single page, so that it's constantly like right here for them to be able to remember you and get a hold of.
One other thing, I had another question from my student. It ties into this. If you're sending out a resume, you might want to attach some references to it. And she actually asked, I thought this was a very interesting question, how many references should you have?
I would say 5 to 6. And also being careful, like how far you go back. If graduate school wasn't that far away, you could use your clarinet teacher and your, orchestra director, your band director. But if you've been working for a while, obviously you want colleagues. So, but I think 5 to 6 is the norm, at least in what I have experienced.
Yeah, that's a great point. Jessica says it's important to touch base with your references regularly as well. Just a few quick personal stories that I'd like to share that kind of back up everything that everyone's saying. I've actually had people ask if they'll be a reference or if I would be a reference for them on one application, and then for like 3 years later, without reminding me or asking, I would just get a reference pop up for this person. So always, if you're applying for something, let your references know. And then I also wanted to mention that I love the physical business card idea. And actually, Kristen, you sent some of physical materials when I ordered your book, and I have it hanging up in my office right next to my chair. And I realized when I was doing my studio recital, when I was recording talking that it was in plain view. So if you give them something that it can be hung up, other people will see it. So your marketing material ended up in our clarinet studio recital, which is appropriate because a lot of your compositions ended up in there as well. So I really think that's a great thing to explore. And Andrea just wrote in the chat to make sure to ask your references if they're comfortable giving you a positive reference. That's really important. So just to end this out, is there any other advice or topics that you would like to throw out there to give to the next generation of clarinetists who are, it's May, they're graduating, they're leaving. What advice would you give them about making their way in this sort of post-pandemic world? Yeah, Maggie.
Sorry. Um, I always sat in the front row in school. But one thing I would say is that a lot of us, or most job applications, do mention diversity. Okay. And I've been on, I think, 3 search committees over the past year. And obviously, this is, it's a burning concern. It's something that's very important in our times. But, when you're working on your CV and thinking about the future, the more that you can do that is more diverse, the better off you will be. I'm trying to play a concert of music by all people that aren't white. I was on a search committee where we're like, well, the only music they played was by dead white guys. So just trying to diversify and show that have understanding of music from all over the world is really helpful, I think, when applying for jobs right now. And that's just me talking from my little place in Illinois. But diversity is certainly important. And if it's mentioned in the job description, address it.
Great advice.
I would also just briefly say, I think any way that you can show how you contribute to diversity. I mean, I think that everybody, especially if a diversity statement is asked for, will talk about how they foster a sense of diversity in a classroom or in a studio. But if you have direct experience being somehow, in a minority situation, if you can call that up and integrate that into your diversity statement, I think it makes it much more personal and far less generic. And I think that especially nowadays, that's what's going to catch people's attention versus, oh yeah, diversity is good, we should have diversity. And, if you can directly relate your experience in performing, educating, being a student to one of the concepts that you value, it's much more powerful and impactful.
We have a question from an HR professional who plays in churches. They don't have a music resume. Do they need one, and what do you recommend goes on it? Not a professional musician, but maybe wanting to get a few gigs.
At the church, just go play for them. They'll be like, yeah, come play with us. That's my advice.
Yeah, I think it's something needs to be written down, just education, even if it's not music related, and any valuable musical experiences that you've had, just selected performances and just boom, 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 list them out, you know. But I agree with Maggie. I mean, I think the best thing in that situation is just go play.
And in being true with yourself, if you're a musician and let's say you're not religious, go seeking out church gigs, because then are you going to be happy in that situation? So like that just kind of made me think about that for a second, because there are some people like you want to make sure you're really in it 100% and then you enjoy the experience.
Great. Any other final advice?
Oh, so one thing I would suggest, I know this has been a really hard year for a lot of our clarinet students, whether they're in high schools or universities. And one of the things I would really encourage you to do is to reach out to your peers and your colleagues and go ahead and create something with them. You know, maybe you're not getting the jobs you want right now, but look at the people around you and say, you know, who could I form a meaningful chamber music relationship with? Or who could I start a festival with? Or who could I create a concert series with? And just think about what you can do on your own, and it helps fill the void. If you're looking at the past year and going, man, that was pretty empty and I really don't know what I would put on a resume, now is a good time to go into project mode and use those people around you and have fun. Do it for you, and hopefully it'll help you in the future.
Great. And anything else? And I'll just close out by saying I think I see in a lot of my students that we go into things thinking about what our success will look like. And I think one of the things looking back that I wish that I could impart upon my and really instill in my students is that there's no success looks any way you want it to. And that if you go in thinking I'm going to teach in a university and then come out of there thinking I'm going to create this really cool thing that no one else is doing, that's success. So I think one of the things that I would just wish my students really understood is that there's no one right way to be a professional musician or to be a musician and to be successful at what you do. So I don't know why I needed the final word, I guess. Thank you all so much for joining us. If anybody has any further questions that you'd like me to forward to a panelist, feel free to drop it in the comments. This will show up on the YouTube channel. You're welcome to comment, and I'm happy to get it to the person you're asking or get it to the panel. But really, thank you so much to everyone that joined us and to our panelists. So, yay.